Hearing on taxes. My name is Gary Pretlow. I'm the chairperson of the New York State Assembly Committee on Ways and Means. Today, we're convening the 14th in a series of 14 hearings conducted by the joint fiscal committees of the legislature to consider the governor's proposed budget for fiscal year 26-27. These hearings are conducted to pursuant to the New York State Constitution and legislative law. Today, the Ways and Means Committee, together with the Senate Finance Committee, chaired by Senator Liz Krueger, will hear testimony regarding the governor's proposals as it pertains to taxes. I will now introduce the members of the Assembly that are with us. We have our Chair of Taxation, Assemblywoman Williams. We also have with us Assemblyperson Otis, Assemblyperson Simon, and Assemblyperson Brunstein. And the Senator will introduce her members.
Thanks. Hi, I'm the abusive Senator Liz Krueger, Finance Chair, and I'm here with my colleagues, Senator Gurnardis from Brooklyn, Senator Brisport from Brooklyn, and Senator Rhodes from what county? Nassau. Thank you.
And Assemblyman Palisano will introduce his conference.
Yes, we have joining us our ranking member, Andrea Bailey, and Assembly member, Brian Miller.
Thank you. Are there minority members?
Oh, I'm
there?
sorry, Senator Rhodes, I introduced him.
Oh, you did?
Senator
Okay.
Rhodes is the ranking Finance Committee member on behalf of Tom O'Mara, who had a death in the family and can't be with us. Sort of clarify that.
Okay, now, just give everyone a quick reading of the rules of the road for governmental witnesses, of which we have one. Members of committees will have 10 minutes for questions, and the non-governmental witnesses will have 3 minutes for their testimony. Governmental witnesses have 10 minutes for testimony. After the governmental witnesses have testified, all other individuals will have 3 minutes to testify, and all members of the legislature will have 3 minutes to question them. Please be advised that all question and answers are to be done within the 3-minute time limit. There are time clocks spaced sporadically throughout this room. When you see the orange light come on, that means you have 30 seconds left. Those 30 seconds should include the question and the answer. Please be advised, members, if you ask a question when the yellow light comes on, please do not expect an answer because your time will have run out. With that, I would like to introduce our acting, you've been acting forever. Our acting tax
In
commissioner.
April. It'll be 5 years in April.
Okay. Amanda Hiller for 10 minutes.
Wonderful, thank you. Good evening. I'm Amanda Hiller, Acting Commissioner of the Department of Taxation and Finance. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss New York taxes, Governor Hochul's executive budget, and the operations of the tax department. Many New Yorkers, and I dare say most Americans, believe New Yorkers pay the highest taxes in the country. On average, New Yorkers do shoulder the highest tax burdens. But this is a gross simplification that hides how those tax burdens are distributed. New York has an extremely progressive income tax rate structure, both for personal income and for corporate income, which means most New York individuals and businesses have very modest income tax burdens, but our highest earning individuals and businesses pay the highest combined tax rates in the country. More than half of New York's personal income tax receipts are paid by fewer than 2% of New York's personal income taxpayers. Over 75% of our corporate franchise tax receipts are paid by just 1/4% of our corporate taxpayers. This concentration of tax burdens is not without risk. Our economic fortunes are tied to the economic fortunes of a tiny fraction of our taxpayers. When those individuals and those businesses have a good year, we see strong income tax receipts. But when our economy slows, the revenue implications of this outsized dependence on just a few taxpayers could be profound. This fiscal year has been a strong year for tax receipts. It looks like we'll close out the fiscal year with a net income tax receipts up $6.7 billion over last year, largely due to a strong stock market. And sales tax receipts up $1.2 billion, driven by increased consumption made possible by that income growth. New York's economy continues to lag behind the national economy, which is slowing. But the division of the budget does project that income, corporate, and sales tax receipts will continue to grow in fiscal year 2027 and beyond. Although New York has seen real wage growth, affordability remains an enormous challenge in communities across the state. Strong tax receipts have allowed Governor Hochul to once again craft an executive budget that holds state tax rates steady while advancing important initiatives to address the needs of hardworking New York families. Over the last several years, Governor Hochul's affordability agenda has delivered much-needed tax relief. Together with the legislature, Governor Hochul returned $2.2 billion in state tax receipts to more than 8.2 million New York households via tax rebate checks. The governor and legislature also cut personal income tax rates for low and middle income taxpayers to the lowest rates in nearly 70 years, providing nearly $1 billion in recurring sales tax relief to 8.3 million New Yorkers. And we simplified eligibility for STAR and simplified and expanded the real property tax credit, two programs that help New Yorkers stay in their homes. Last year also saw a historic expansion of the Empire State Child Credit, increasing the maximum credit to $1,000 for children under age 4 and to $500 for children ages 4 to 16. By decoupling from the federal child credit, we were able to change the way the credit phases out at higher income levels and eliminate the minimum earned income requirement that historically functioned to exclude some of our poorest families. This year, Governor Hochul is again proposing to disconnect from federal tax rules in some key areas. Most notably, the governor has proposed a significant expansion of the Child Independent Care Credit, decoupling from the federal rules in order to expand eligibility and benefits so more New York families can afford childcare. Their governor is also proposing to protect New Yorkers and the nonprofits they support by ensuring that charitable contributions will remain deductible in New York, even if President Trump follows through on threats to strip disfavored organizations of their 501c3 status. And the governor is proposing to decouple from several provisions of President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act that simply don't make sense for New York. At the tax department, we continue to strive to ensure that the tax policies you enact are administered fairly and effectively. We processed 28 million tax filings and collected $162 billion in state and local revenue last year. Our ability to work at this scale is a function of sophisticated tax processing technology. We continue to be focused on replatforming and modernizing the core IT systems that power the department. We are now in year 5 of this 5-year project, which is being done in-house, and we are on track to finish on time and under budget. In the last year alone, we rolled out a new wage and withholding system, made significant improvements to our online services system, and successfully piloted the new real property system online, which is replacing outdated property tax administration software with new modern cloud-based tools that will allow assessors to work more effectively and efficiently. As we work to complete the remaining components of the current modernization effort, we are also thinking about what comes next. We are already scoping the next IT projects to address less central but still critical technology systems, such as the OSCAR system for highway use tax compliance. And we're thinking about how to leverage our new IT systems to advance initiatives we were not equipped to pursue before. One of the initiatives I'm most excited about is a comprehensive sales tax vendor re-registration. Under the state's sales tax laws, every business that intends to sell taxable goods or services must register with the department and receive a certificate of authority to collect and remit the taxes paid by its customers. And for each registered business, there must be at least one individual who is personally responsible for ensuring that the business meets its sales tax responsibilities and is personally liable for any sales tax debts of that business. Businesses may close, and the individuals responsible for those businesses may change, which is why the tax law authorizes the tax commissioner to require periodic re-registration. It's been 18 years since the tax department conducted a sales tax re-registration. By all accounts, the last one did not go well. That program, which began in 2008, was driven by the state's need for revenue during a recession and included an an application fee to generate additional revenue. The tax department was unprepared and faced additional challenges when the same recession led to a broad tax amnesty program in 2009 that complicated the re-registration in progress. We've long known that our sales tax vendor information is dated. We also knew that our ancient IT systems could not handle a re-registration program. We've been anxiously waiting for our systems to catch up to our ambitions and have been thinking deeply about how to conduct a smooth and effective re-registration campaign. Governor Hochul's executive budget includes a proposal to this end. It would modify the department's current re-registration authority so we can conduct a re-registration over the course of 3 years rather than all at once. And it would ease application, decision, and protest timelines for taxpayers, the department, and the Division of Tax Appeals so that issues that arise during the re-registration process can be handled well. The proposal would also authorize a sales tax discount program that would offer penalty abatement and an interest discount to sales tax vendors that resolve their outstanding sales tax debts before the re-registration begins. Sales tax debts grow quickly due to high statutory interest rates and often become insurmountable for businesses and their owners. Our goal is to conduct an effective re-registration that functions as a reset for active businesses with sales tax debts and ensures we have accurate information so we look to the correct responsible individuals when sales tax debts go unpaid. Sales tax re-registration is just one of the initiatives in Governor Hochul's executive budget that is aimed at easing tax compliance. We are grateful to the governor for advancing proposals to simplify and standardize the definition of a farmer for various farm-related tax benefits, to ease the compliance burden for owners of EV charging equipment, and to add flexibility for businesses that want to enroll in the pass-through entity tax. These legislative proposals complement ongoing efforts at the tax department to simplify our forms, instructions, and guidance in order to promote taxpayer compliance and improve the taxpayer experience. I remain incredibly proud of Team Tax and the work we are doing at the tax department. I'm excited about the initiatives we are pursuing and look forward to working with all of you to move them forward. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Williams.
Thank you. A little bit of difficulty here. So first I'll just probably use like 5 minutes of my time. In regards to the STAR program, what would the new process be for STAR credit recipients to reconcile their STAR credit amounts on their income tax return if they believe that an overpayment or underpayment has occurred?
So we currently handle STAR credit disputes with our Office of Real Property Tax Services, which is overseen by the State Board of Real Property Tax Services. And so that's where we resolve issues around overpayment or underpayment of those credits. The credit is in personal income tax credit, which means a dispute can also be taken to the Tax Appeals Tribunal. The real question, I think there's a part of one of those technical corrections proposals is to remove the ability to have the STAR credit be a line item on the income tax return form. And that's, historically, it hasn't been. And so it's really a technical cleanup because that's not where the STAR credit is claimed now.
Okay. And how many homeowners are currently enrolled in the STAR program? And what is the participation split between basic and enhanced STAR?
You know, I don't have those statistics on hand, but I know they're on our website. We have tax facts on our website that include that information. I know that the vast majority of STAR recipients are receiving the basic credit. The enhanced credit is going to seniors with incomes below, I think it's $98,000 last year. And it's a significantly larger benefit, but it's going to a much smaller audience.
Right. And second, we know regarding the J51, the executive proposes to reestablish and modify the J51 program to provide a real property tax abatement for 100% of the certified reasonable cost. How does this version of J51 compare to previous authorizations of the program?
You know, I can't really answer that question. The J51 program is, although it's considered a property tax abatement, it's a housing program. It's always been administered as a housing program. And I know that it's being proposed to reinstate the J51 in order to support the availability of affordable housing and ensure that those affordable units are being properly maintained.
Okay. Mr. Chair?
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So we've also been joined with Senator Sepulveda, our Judiciary Chair, our new Judiciary Chair. Hi, and who else?
Congratulations.
Again? Oh, no, Bridgeport was already here. But our first testifier is Senator Gounardes, Chair of Budget and Revenue. Or no, is that your name right there? Yes, Budget and Revenue Committee.
Whatever you want it to be.
What do you want it to be?
I want it to be chair of ice cream and rainbows, chocolate bars.
I think we all want that.
Heavy
right?
on the ice
I was
cream.
right, Budget and Revenue.
Good evening, Commissioner. Great to see you again. I want to start off some of my questioning, picking up from some of the things that we talked about last year. And first, on the Secure Choice Program. Last year when we spoke, you were preparing to do a limited rollout by the summer, and then you were kind of holding off on the independent worker piece until this year. Can you give us an update on the Secure Choice Program, what the rollout's been, and what the next phases are?
So the program has begun rolling out to employers. We have, I think, just under 1 million in enrolled assets, with about, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 participants. The rollout to employers, you know, we've been contacting employers and telling them that this is a mandate for them to make this available to their employees. And, you know, we've tried to start out with a soft touch on that to try to get employers to sort of willingly raise their hand to do that. I expect that there will come a time when we come back to the legislature to talk about what happens to employers who are supposed to provide this benefit to their employees and don't, but we're definitely not there yet. We are working with the program administrator for the program, which is Vestwell, that's about to begin a new outreach to employers that are responsible for providing this program to their employees. I think what I'm most excited about is that the opt-out rate for employees that this program is available to is only 17%, which means most of the employees who are able to participate in the program are taking advantage of the program. And I think that that's a really strong sign for how the program will roll out. We anticipate bringing sort of freelancers into the program, perhaps as soon as this fall, as we continue to roll out to employers. You know, we certainly think that the infrastructure that's available for employees can also be made available to freelancers. The challenge really is that the employer base is the much harder base to get enrolled in the program, and so we really are trying to make sure that we're rolling that out well.
Understood. Thank you. Last year, we also talked about the New York's piloting of the e-file program, which has now been
Yes.
killed by the feds. Do you have any intention to kind of continue to pilot this on our own? I mean, the state of New Jersey recently announced that they were going to be creating their own e-file program. Is that something that is of interest to the department?
It is certainly of interest to us as a department. So one, I don't think that it is tenable until we complete the IT modernization that's in progress now. I think that there are some trade-offs that we will have to grapple with. So right now, the software industry, which successfully killed the direct file program, makes free file software available to income eligible taxpayers, and often, including in most years, including this year, have essentially made their support for state tax filing with their free file product conditioned on the state not having its own direct filing tool. So I think that there are some challenges and some trade-offs about how we might go about making a direct filing option available to taxpayers. I also think part of the trade-off is that in the free file system, you're doing one questionnaire for both your federal and your state return. You're being asked about your dependents once. And then the software fills out the form. But with a state filing tool that's a direct filing tool, you'll have to take your federal return and input it into the state system because it won't flow directly into the state system. And I think that that might be a challenge for taxpayers. But I'm certainly interested in trying to solve for this because I continue to be frustrated that tax preparation fees discount the refundable credits that we provide as income supports to low-income taxpayers. If you have to pay $250 to get your tax return prepared, then that's $250 of refundable credit that we were paying for that you didn't get.
Yeah, sure. Well, we look forward to working with you more on that.
Sure.
Once you get the computer system all set up.
We're getting there.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the decoupling provisions in
Sure.
the governor's budget. You mentioned that she is proposing to decouple from the things that make the most sense for New York.
Yep.
There are a couple of areas where she's choosing not to decouple from, notably on Section 179 small business expensing. We're giving the authority to New York City to decouple, but not the state. Can you comment on that or speak to that?
So I believe that the governor's executive budget is carrying New York City's decoupling proposals as is, and that there wasn't a decision to support or not support those decouplings. I think at the tax department, we think that there are a couple of places that small business expensing is one of them. The business interest limitations are another, where you introduce enormous complexity into into how those tax provisions play out between the federal and the state. You have to maintain different schedules for federal and state purposes for how particular particular pieces of equipment have been expensed, and that would be a permanent challenge that was created by the decoupling, and that although there is money attached, there is a cost to the state. These are benefits that help small business. They're not the most expensive provisions of the HR 1 bill, and that complexity for taxpayers and for the department just doesn't make that trade-off the right trade-off.
Do you have data that you can send us showing which types of corporate filers are in fact using that deduction on their state returns currently?
I don't know, but I can certainly look, and
I would
we can
appreciate a
certainly try to
follow-up.
figure that out. That'll sort of depend on how that return information is flowing through onto our return. I just don't know.
It's my understanding that the way that exemption is set up right now, it really benefits, it flows to the highest earning corporations, and so I'm just curious just to get a breakdown so we have a better sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it actually is a large corporation, the sophistication to determine the different scheduling is not as complex as it's
Absolutely.
Joe's hardware store down the block, which is probably not even paying that tax in the first
I
place.
think that there's a dollar limit on the assets that can be expensed.
Over 4 million, I think,
Yeah,
was expanded
so
in
there's some challenges there that function to limit it.
Yeah, well, we appreciate whatever
Yeah,
data you have.
absolutely, of course.
The other thing I want to ask about is the QSBS exemption that
Mm-hmm.
exists, that was expanded in the one big beautiful BS bill that was
Yeah.
passed. And you're familiar with the QSBS, the
Yep.
Qualified Small Business
Yep.
Stock Exemption. It's my understanding that although it's named for small business stock exemption, it actually was created intentionally to incentivize the venture capital industry to invest in startups in the early 90s. And the premise of the program is that the profits derived off of those startup investments are enjoyed for up to a certain threshold tax-free. So before HR 1, the first $10 million of every profit made on those investments, those venture capitalists could enjoy that money tax-free. HR 1 bumps that up to $15 million. And not only that, as the New York Times has documented, under the tax code, you can gift your shares in those companies to multiple family trusts that you own, and each of those trusts can then get that full exemption. So one venture capitalist can divvy up his stock holdings to 10 trusts, and each of those trusts can get up to $15 million tax-free per investment. The governor's not proposing to decouple from that exemption, and I'm wondering if you can speak to whether that's a wise decision, and if that's even fair for people who to enjoy up to $15 million in profits tax-free.
So one, I think that for the governor's executive budget proposal, the proposal to not decouple from that provision is really because the provision has been generally understood as primarily helping small businesses, although it is certainly possible that very clever tax lawyers have figured out how to take advantage of
But if I just
opportunities.
small businesses are not public corporations that are traded on the stock market. So it's called the small business exemption, but it's actually for companies that
Oh,
go public and are,
yeah,
are
I
publicly
think that the
traded.
intention of the proposal of the exemption when it was first created was to help, share some of the risk associated with making investments in startups, because some startups succeed and some startups don't succeed. And when, the way that that benefit is structured, you have to hold your investment for 5 years in a startup before you can take advantage of it. Now, one of the things that HR1 did is, I believe, is that it actually reduced the holding period for some of those stocks. So it will function a little differently. But it's, I think, intended to try to help. The original intention of that exclusion is to try to help encourage investments in those new companies.
Do you have data showing who's claiming that credit, whether it's a real person or a non-person filer, like a trust committing their tax returns?
I think it's the same question as looking at the expensing. We can absolutely look at that.
I'd appreciate follow-up on that.
Our ability,
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Assembly.
Assemblywoman Bailey?
Good evening. Thank you very much. I'm going to shift gears here for a minute. The governor's proposed and it added alternative nicotine products
yes.
to the definition of tobacco products, making them subject to the cigarette and tobacco wholesale tax, which carries the rate of 75%. So I have a couple questions. What was the reasoning for lumping these distinct products that don't contain tobacco into the legacy tobacco, in with legacy tobacco products? And did we explore pursuing a new tax to put these distinctively in nicotine-only products, similar to what we did with vapor products?
We didn't. I think that we believe that treating alternative nicotine products the way we treat the other tobacco products, which aren't cigarettes. The other tobacco product category includes like little cigars. And that is a structure that is a price-based tax structure. So bringing these products, and it's not just pouches, it's a range of alternative nicotine products. I would not be surprised if in a couple of years we're seeing nicotine gummies. But we know that the tobacco industry is intent on continuing to addict young people to nicotine products. And we first saw that with vapor. And now the range of products has now moved to include essentially smokeless nicotine pouches instead of chewing tobacco. And I think we'll continue to see more creative nicotine delivery products in the industry. And the alternative nicotine structure in the law creates a pretty clean structure for how to tax those products across different potential variations on the product, because it's not about the number of units in a pack, it's about the price at which it's sold. I think it's important to distinguish this tax between our cigarette taxes. Our cigarette taxes are the highest in the country, and the price of a pack of cigarettes will vastly exceed the price of any alternative nicotine product on the market. And those alternative nicotine products under this proposed tax structure would also be taxed at a lower price point than vapor products, the nicotine vapor products.
Okay, so states that have imposed this type of a tax, they've seen a loss of revenue from an increase in the illicit sales, as well as changes to consumer behavior who can buy these products tax-free in neighboring states and territories. So do you have a plan in place to address the enforcement
Of course.
against the illicit sales?
Of course. I mean, we already enforce tobacco and vapor taxes. Well, actually, we enforce tobacco taxes. We don't enforce vapor taxes, but there is a proposal in this executive budget to charge the tax department with doing vapor enforcement, because we have come to understand that vapor is a scourge in our communities, that it's being used by children. They're marketed in bubble gum and cherry flavors, which, by the way, so is Zyn. Zyn is in, you can get peach Bellini Zyn and other fruity flavors. These are not products just marketed for adults. I think what's important, certainly having a high tax structure creates some challenges in the enforcement space, and we have a criminal enforcement division that is charged with doing that enforcement. But we have high taxes to create a barrier to entry for children. That's always been a core rationale for having some of the highest taxes on these products in the country. And I am stunned by the extent to which the tobacco industry has been pushing back on taxing these products, because these products are being marketed on TikTok. The rate of consumption by young people doubled from 2023 to 2024. It's still low. But if we are successful at cracking down on vapor, as this budget proposes, then we will see more children move to alternative nicotine products.
So that will actually bring me right to my last question real quick, and I've got 30 seconds. So from an enforcement perspective, do you have data on the percentage of cannabis shops selling to minors compared to with shops that are selling products such as Zins to minors?
No. So one, we don't have authority to look at Zyn today. And I don't believe our cannabis laws charge us with looking at the age of the purchasers, so we aren't the enforcers for that. But I do want to come back to remind folks that nicotine is one of the most addictive substances out there. It creates dependence faster than other products. And I'm just going to charge ahead. I've known people who quit heroin and nicotine, and they said quitting nicotine is harder.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Senator Sepulveda.
Is this thing on?
Yes.
Yes.
I feel like Henny Youngman right now. Just a couple of questions on STAR eligibility. Do you know how many additional homeowners became eligible to the expansion of the STAR eligibility program?
We expanded STAR eligibility we simplified the eligibility, and I don't think we have good data yet on how many new STAR recipients are going to be eligible because of the timing of the STAR program. So those changes were done last May, and so those eligibility rules that have simplified like whose income we look at and who needs to be resident on the property. Those come for the cycle that is essentially this time of year when the determination about whether you're going to get the property tax exemption or credit is being made. So we'll see that as we move into the upcoming STAR cycle.
Do you know approximately when you'll have that information available?
We'll start STAR exemptions this spring, and we'll be mailing STAR checks through, I think, May through November.
What's approximately the total cost of the expanded?
The expansion?
Yeah.
We think it's a fairly modest expansion, probably in the tens of millions in a multi-billion-dollar program. But we also think that we were excluding people that were always intended to be benefited by this program, and that the complications around how you had to register in the program were a deterrent to having eligible people come into the program. So we think that by simplifying, which people account in a property, I think maybe an example would help. If you inherited a home with your brother and you live in the home because you took care of mom and you inherited the house, your brother's income would decide whether or not you were eligible for STAR, even though you were the one living there, you were the one paying the taxes. And so now we're looking at the residents of the home and not just the out-of-state extended homeowners that we never had income information for anyway.
So, I represent a district that's probably one of the poorest districts in the entire state.
Sure.
So these programs are important. So do you have any information about whether the program has measurably reduced housing displacement or tax delinquencies?
I don't, and I'm not sure whether it has. I think it probably has for enhanced STAR recipients more than for other recipients. I think that the STAR program, when it was established, was to create a vehicle for the state to help shoulder some of the burdens of school taxes for residents. The income limit from the beginning was about $500,000. We now have a staggered income for the credit versus the exemption. But I think the idea was for the state to be able to provide targeted relief to homeowners when the entire community bears
Thank
the school
you,
tax burden.
Senator.
Just if you can give me the information.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Commissioner. I kind of want to pick up on where my colleague left on alternative nicotine products
good.
tax.
I get more time.
I'm personally, and I think a lot of people are having a hard time understanding why lumping this in, a product that doesn't contain tobacco is being lumped in with tobacco products as cigars, chewing tobacco, or whatever, that is known to cause cancer. Nicotine, I'm not saying it's healthy, but it's certainly less harmful, does not cause cancer. And what you're doing, we know New York has a goal to reduce smoking. Our healthcare budget estimates are billions of dollars in costs of fighting smoking and cancer and things of that nature. Why would, effectively doubling the price and making it more expensive for people to use this product so they don't smoke or so they can get off smoking, how is that any common sense in this discussion? And I guess I have to ask the question, what consideration in this discussion was harm reduction considered when drafting this legislation? Because you have people that want to quit smoking, that have quit smoking, and now this might be an option for them, but it's going to cost them that much more. So that might even lead them going back to smoking again, correct?
Smoking cessation products are excluded from the tax. The products that you're talking about aren't smoking cessation products.
I'm
And
not
they're
saying-
being
I'm-
marketed to children. And so I think that the harm reduction that we're talking about here is helping ensure that these stay out of reach of our children by ensuring that they're taxed. I think that's been the
that's-
point of all of our taxes
It's
in
certainly
this
not
space.
working with the cannabis industry, Commissioner. There are kids using cannabis all the time.
And I didn't write that law.
Well, it just gives you an example. This is, there are people that use this product, adults, 1.5 million adult smokers who are looking to use, an alternative if they want to.
Absolutely.
Then that's taken away from them. You're going to increase the price of it so significantly that why would they want to get off it if they can get the nicotine from a cigarette versus, and if the health commissioner was sitting next to you right now, they would certainly say that the tobacco product is much more dangerous to your health than just the nicotine overall. And the healthcare budget of $12+ billion is significant in that regard.
I think, so certainly I think that smoking cigarettes is more dangerous than consuming other nicotine products. I'm not going to try to contest that.
Well, then why are we
I
making the
believe
product-
that.
why are we making
Because
the
we're
product
not.
so much more
because
expensive?
that's just not how the proposal is structured.
The product's going to
The
make
product is going to be
the
more
proposal's going to make it
expensive.
more expensive for people who might want to get off the cigarette.
But it will be less expensive than cigarettes by an order of magnitude. So if the reason to not tax this is because you think that it will be more expensive than cigarettes, that's just false. The idea here is to continue to make these products available, to use an existing structure in the law that looks at the price point of these products rather than some other way to measure the number of units in a pack of cigarettes. We chose a structure that is a price-based structure. So if these products are marketed at a high price point, there will be higher taxes, and at a low price point, there will be lower taxes. But the real point continues to be that we're
Commissioner.
making this harder for children to buy them.
I disagree with this about children, but that's a debate we can have on another time. You said that, well, I know, but we can.
We could.
You did say that, my colleague talked about the illicit stores. You said you can handle that, but you can't address consumer behavior. For example, I live in the southern tier. I can take a stone and throw it over the border to Pennsylvania. I can drive down the road and go to a Native American facility and get these products without the same taxation or regulation that we're doing here. So that's something that's going to be a problem. You're not going to be able to do anything about that as well.
We will certainly face challenges, but children won't be doing that. Which comes back to, look, the governor is a grandmother. She cares about the health of our children. This is a loophole in our law. It happens that right now we're talking about nicotine pouches, but the tax proposal is to include the universe of alternative nicotine products that are out there. These are not health products, no matter what that industry says, because they've been in the nicotine delivery industry since the 1850s
Commissioner,
and
I
have
will tell
continued to
you, though,
move through the
Commissioner-
product lines.
Commissioner, I got 20 seconds left, and I appreciate your passion. But there are people who have a disagreement when you say this isn't going to be as much, very expensive with this change and this tax being added to it. It's going to be more expensive. It can be a disincentive for people to continue using it and continue to get on smoking and cigarettes, which is much more dangerous to your health because it causes cancer than nicotine.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Rhodes.
Thank you. Do I have 5 or 10?
I think 5, because that's my clock says 5.
5, okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hillard, for your testimony. Sure. You have a $260 billion budget. In your testimony, you indicated that revenues from sales taxes were up by 1.2 billion. Income tax receipts were up by 6.7 billion over last year, for a total of about $8 billion. Is that correct?
Yes, the state taxes.
Okay, and a $260 billion budget anticipates revenues increasing by what?
We collected $162 billion last year. I believe that the Division of Budget expects that those revenues will grow next year. I don't know the exact number, but by several $billion.
And so the revenue would certainly support a $260 billion budget, which is what the governor anticipates spending, correct?
I think that the operations of the tax department are a good investment for the state.
Do you forecast out what you expect your revenue to be in future
The
years?
Division of the Budget projects out in the financial plan what those revenues will be. The tax department, contributes information to that process, but ultimately it's the Division of the Budget that does those projections.
And do you know what the revenue forecast is for fiscal year '28, for example?
I know it's in the financial plan documents that were part of the budget.
Okay. Would you agree that we do not, in New York State, have a revenue problem as of today?
I think that the amount of revenue that is needed depends on the amount of spending that is determined. We aren't, and certainly the tax department, we aren't the ones who decide that. The tax laws are decided by you, and the spending is decided by you. We certainly
But
work
you would
to
agree
try
that
to
if
make
we
sure
kept,
that
if,
that's.
for example, if we kept spending flat this year, in theory, we don't have a revenue issue. We would have probably $6 or $7 billion in surplus as opposed to a flat budget.
I think that that's a simplification of how the budget works. So, for example, I don't know what the extent of the state spending on our public assistance programming would be and what those demands would be. I don't know what the revenue will actually be because so much of our revenue is dependent on the performance of the stock market. And so in a
Which you
good stock
indicated-
market year, we
Which you
have more
indicated,
revenue.
Commissioner, was performing quite well, correct?
Well, it has been performing quite well, but if it turns out that AI is a bubble, then certainly all of our retirement accounts are going to be challenged.
Well, you also forecast that even though you say that the economy is slowing, which is a conclusion most economists disagree with, in fact, Goldman Sachs indicates that economic growth will be 2.8%, up from 2.2% last year.
Oh, I think I just read it in the Times last week.
Okay. The question becomes, you've indicated in your testimony that New Yorkers believe, and you've confirmed in fact that they do, that New York has the highest individual tax burden in the nation.
Yes.
The Tax Foundation State Tax Competitive Index rankings for 2025 put New York dead last out
Absolutely.
of 50 states. Forbes magazine ranks New York with the second worst business climate in America.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the governor talking about, you have in your budget $1.7 billion of revenue enhancements, call them what they are, they're tax increases. Why are any tax increases included in the budget if we do not have a revenue issue?
The governor has not proposed to increase taxes.
Well, when you're extending,
We're extending
when
the
you're
the
extending,
top corporate tax rate, yes.
so when you're extending taxes that would have expired, it's a tax increase, is it not?
So I think the governor has proposed to maintain the status quo, but not to raise taxes above their current level. I think that whether or not that is sufficient to meet the spending goals that you and your colleagues determine is something I can't speak to because I'm not the one who's going to decide that. I do think that New Yorkers pay the highest tax burden in the country. We have the highest per capita tax burden. We have the highest combined income tax rates and the highest corporate tax rates in the country.
So why
in
is New York
City,
punishing success with additional taxes in this budget?
we're not.
If tax cuts are supposed to expire and are not, it has the effect of increasing taxes for the next 3 years. We don't have to argue about that. It's simple numbers.
Oh,
People can do math
absolutely.
on their own.
But I think that the New York State laws are replete with provisions that are set to expire in order to provide a moment for inflection and reflection before determining to extend them, but
Well,
that most of them
unfortunately, the
are
governor's
extended every
reflex is
Thank,
to
year.
raise
thank you,
taxes.
Acting Commissioner. Assemblyman Otis?
Thank you, Commissioner, and always nice to see you.
Always.
My question is, over the last 5 years, you've upgraded the platforms for the different technology pieces at Taxation and Finance for different components of what you do. It's not a one-size-fits-all, different roles. Could you share with us a little of, in that upgrade, the care in terms of upgrading cybersecurity protection to tax information as part of that upgrade?
So in the state IT world, the core responsibilities for cybersecurity rests with the Office of Information Technology Services, and they provide those services primarily on a network level. New York Tax has particular responsibilities to ensure the security of tax information, and we have protocols throughout the department, including IT protocols, to help ensure that we can maintain the security of that tax information. Tax information is segregated from other data in the state system, and we're actually doubling down on that by creating additional server capacity for tax data so that we can ensure that the protections around it safeguard it from other parts of the larger state enterprise. But information security is central to how we handle tax information. We're also, of course, concerned about how humans handle that tax information on our systems, because the employees of the tax department have access to all of that tax information. So we train very heavily on that. We use systematic audit trails within our system to help us be able to track whose tax information you clicked on this morning and who else you looked at today. We have systems to keep track of whether you're looking at people who live near you. Because we know for our employees, we know where you live. We can geo-fence around that and make sure that you're not looking at your neighbors, you're not looking at your family, in order to help make sure that our systems are helping to safeguard against that kind of human error as well.
So that's great, and thank you. And certainly in this space, the threat continues to expand all the time.
Oh, absolutely. One of the places that we're seeing that some of the greatest challenges are phishing scams that target tax preparers. And that ultimately lead to the release of taxpayer information out of those preparer offices. And we see that on the back end in identity theft issues. We have a team of people that just work with taxpayers who are facing identity theft challenges.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on the project.
Thank you. I mean, we're very proud of it. We're getting it done.
Okay, thank you. Senator Bridgeport. Oh, you have no questions. I misunderstood you before. Then Senator Krueger. Thank you so much. First off, for the record, I couldn't agree with you more about the taxation on these scary, addictive new products that are absolutely targeting children. And not only is the governor right because she's a grandmother, and are you right?
And she cares.
Yes, but also there's decades of research showing when we make it more expensive for young people to get access to tobacco products, they use it less. They don't get addicted in the first place, which is really the problem of why this is not a smoking cessation model, because there's no evidence of that, but there's plenty of evidence of the skyrocketing rates of addiction by young people to new kinds of tobacco products. We have to stop that. We know what it means when we didn't stop that. And so I just wanted to thank you and the governor for holding strong on that, because I could not agree more. There was an earlier question about why did we couple and not couple with changing our policies in relationship to a number of new federal tax policies. So one I had asked earlier today of Hope Knight, but I think she directed me probably to you, was the federal opportunity zone tax deal that came out of Trump 1
Yep.
and is now being actively used. And you don't even have to live in New York to get these tax deductions that we could have decoupled from, and we didn't. And apparently it's going to cost us billions of dollars over X number of years as the people who bought into these deals now sell them off. So can you explain to me why we wouldn't want to decouple on that?
So I think we decoupled from one aspect of the Empire Zone, I mean, the Opportunity
Opportunity
Zones
Zone.
program back when we were doing the core decoupling from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the Trump 1, which was enacted in 2017. There's a separate tax benefit that I think is the one you're talking about now, which applies to taxpayers that have held their investment for 10 years. So the earliest investments were in 2018, so we don't have that tax coming around yet, those tax benefits coming around yet, because nobody has reached the holding period yet for
And
those.
when will that holding
I think that the guidance for Opportunity Zone credits came out in 2018, and so the earliest investments would have been in 2018, so we would see that coming around in 2028.
It's still not too early for us to be smart about.
I believe that there have been conversations about decoupling from that provision of the Opportunity Zones program during the last couple of budget cycles. The outcome of that, I was informed about.
Okay. So I hope that that does not fall off somebody's priority list, because I would be quite offended to learn that my tax dollars going to people who they're doing building of luxury housing and other activities around the country, not even in poor communities in other states, and they'd be giving up their obligation to pay us their taxes as New Yorkers.
I certainly know that it has been a subject of discussion, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it a subject of discussion as part of the budget process this year.
Okay, thank you. So there's lots of discussion going around about, yes, we're the highest tax state and city, and yet there's also research showing that when we raise taxes, we actually seem to gain more millionaires than we lose, and that the millionaires who are leaving actually go to other high tax states statistically. Do you track that kind of data?
So we track a bunch of those kinds of data points. So one, I think that two things can be true at the same time. We have an out-migration from New York. We've always had out-migration from New York. Millionaires move at a higher pace than other taxpayers, and I'm not really surprised about that because they have more economic resources than New Yorkers as a larger group, and so it costs money to move. We see millionaires are more mobile than New Yorkers as a whole as a group. We have more millionaires in the last full year than we did the year before. It is true. We had almost 100,000 millionaires in 2024, which is their tax returns that were filed in 25. But that was primarily due to a really booming stock market. Fully a third of those millionaires were not millionaires the year before. 90% of our millionaires are in that $1 million to $5 million range, not that 25 million and up range. They are very sensitive to the success of the stock market, both because unearned income is a core component of the income of our wealthiest New Yorkers, but also because the financial services industry has a significant footprint in New York City, and we also benefit from the high wages and bonuses that those employees receive. So New York is more sensitive to the stock market's success than other states are. In a good year, we get more money. It's absolutely true. We have more millionaires. But in a bad year, we'll see that drop away.
Thank you. So, some information I just got today as I was sitting on the dais at other hearing was the fact that, and I distinctly remember the years that you would come and tell us about more tax auditors get us more revenue. They make money for us.
Well, I don't think I've said that, but I think it
Okay,
gets said.
others have said that. Sorry, maybe it was not you. But I remember those years. So now apparently we're down a huge number of auditors.
We are.
From previous. And so one, why? Have we figured out another way to collect the taxes? And are we not missing out on getting people's taxes if we don't actually do audits?
Well, one, we'd like to have more auditors than we do.
Okay,
It's not money that's necessarily the barrier to that.
yep.
It is hard for the department to recruit accounting graduates. It is just a challenging challenging hiring environment for accounting professionals. And so we continue to compete in the marketplace for accounting hires. It's also true for attorneys. It's hard to it's hard to hire tax attorneys. Those are challenges in the marketplace. I don't think that civil service system structure helps us in that. But we are actively recruiting for auditors. We'd like to have more auditors. We, as an agency, we, along with other agencies, had to attrit during a lot of the 2010s in order to meet the zero growth budget goals that were being set for us. We had already had an aging workforce, and so we're seeing key retirements. But we are actively recruiting, and we continue to seek to make the best use of our employees that we can. There's a long tail. We try to work the best cases first, and the more audit capacity we have, the further down the line we can go. But we are always working the best cases, and then the question is just how much further down the line to the not-so-good cases we get in any given year.
So we know at the federal level, they've changed their policies to discourage the IRS from doing audits that I would call the good opportunity audits, the big revenue driving audits on wealthier taxpayers who actually think, and now I think they know they're not going to get audited because it's IRS policy not to go after them. And so instead the IRS is going after, by the way, the value of audits also is it discourages other people. When your next door neighbor
Absolutely.
who's not paying their taxes gets caught, you go, wait a second, maybe I ought to pay my taxes. This is a little scary. So I hope that we're also focusing, when you say the best cases, the cases that will both bring real money into the state and serve as diversion lessons to get other people to remember how important it is to pay their taxes, because we won't be able to piggyback what we used to do when the federal government would catch you. Am I right?
You are very right. I mean, this is, I think, probably the concern that most troubles me in this moment as I think about the state of state taxes. I think this is something that will hit a couple of years from now, but the state relies on the federal government to audit federal issues, and then the state audits primarily state issues. The federal government has made, and tax compliance is a function of a balance between enforcement and compliance. Most people comply because they fear the risk of enforcement. And the IRS has made clear that they're stepping away from enforcement in a number of really key areas, and that is a signal that tax enforcement doesn't really matter. I think most taxpayers don't really distinguish between the IRS and the state tax department. They just think that enforcement is stepping back, that the IRS staffing has been gutted. The tax department staffing has not been gutted, but our ability to step into the breach on those federal tax issues would be a learning curve for us because we haven't had to audit those issues before in quite the same way. And I'm sure that the taxpayer community would be concerned if we were bringing auditors to the table that don't have those
Before the clock cuts you off, I hope that you will think through what we can be doing in the legislature to help you and the tax
Absolutely.
department come up with new models, because we're going to need them.
We are.
Thank you, Senator.
That's
Assemblymember
absolutely true.
Miller?
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony. First of all, I'd just like to thank you for your efforts to ensure that eligible New Yorkers receive benefits to which they are qualified for. I especially appreciate streamlining of the STAR program and the improvements made to income verification process.
Yep.
I understand that STAR is a state-administered and now income verified largely through state data matching, while the senior citizen exemption is locally administered and requires annual refiling in many municipalities. Given the success of these reforms to the STAR program, are there any plans to similarly simplify or modernize the income verification process for the senior citizens homeowners exemptions? As we know, seniors must reapply annually and submit income documentation to their local assessor, which can be very burdensome. Is the department exploring options to coordinate with local governments to reduce paperwork and to make the process more accessible for our eligible seniors?
We aren't engaged in those conversations now, but I would certainly welcome those conversations. We do income verification for the STAR program. There is a population of seniors that don't file income taxes, and we go through an income worksheet process with them. One of the changes we made last year was to reduce the frequency with which seniors have to make those income worksheet submissions. And I think that that will sort of ease the burden on some of our lowest income seniors, and seniors that don't have reportable income because we have income exclusions for them. But the senior citizen exemption has always been a locally administered program where the eligibility determination was being made locally. I don't know how the assessment community would respond to the opportunity to perhaps work with us around that income verification for those programs. I think that they resisted the idea that the state undertook income verification for the STAR program, so I don't know how that would play out. But we'd certainly welcome that conversation because we are in this business already for the STAR program.
Okay, I really hope that that conversation is extended throughout our assessing communities across the state, and I'm pretty sure the seniors will probably really appreciate that if they didn't have to go in annually or whatever to make that qualification for that exemption.
Yeah, I can see where the friction might be in a concept like that, but we're already in this business.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just have a couple of questions for you. In 21-22, we increased taxes on high earners in New York State, and this current year, we're extending that for additional 5 years. Was there any outflow of New Yorkers because of that tax increase in 21-22?
I think it's always hard to know the specific causes of outmigration, but we did see a spike in our highest earning New Yorkers in the rate at which they were leaving the state that was distinctive that year. So, the taxpayers that were earning $25 million or more and saw their tax rate go up 3%, they were leaving at a greater rate. Now, I think one can read that data in lots of different ways. One of the things I've come to understand is that you can look at this data and support any narrative you want. I look at that data and I think that the taxpayers who were sensitive to that rate change left, and the ones that weren't sensitive to that rate change stayed. But I don't know how those taxpayers would respond to another rate change. The combined tax burden for a New York City resident is 14-point-something%. And, because we impose a New York City tax and a state tax, which makes it the highest income tax rate in the country on those taxpayers. So I don't know what the response would be in a future year.
Well, I know that there is an aversion to raising taxes, and I can understand that. But I'm looking at the gains that these individuals made based on the big bad bill, the big ugly bill. I have a chart in front of me that shows that the bottom 20% have a total an average tax savings of $160, and individuals with income of $1 million or more have an average savings of $51,000. So if New York were to raise its taxes, the net effect would be an increase of taxes to New York. And of course, there would also be a decrease in total take-home income for these wealthy people, but this is a $51,000 increase that they may not have been expecting. So if we don't do it this year, could we do what they did to us and do a tax increase effective next year on high-income individuals? So that's just an idea.
Look, I think that your ability to raise tax rates, I don't decide tax rates. We administer the tax rates that you set. I continue to be concerned about our tax rates because we don't have a linear tax structure. We have a logarithmic tax structure where almost everybody pays very little and a few people pay a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I just don't think I think that that's a risk that a state like New York shouldn't be undertaking and shouldn't be setting itself up for. I was here during the 2008 recession where we were slashing everything we could find in order to try to find a way to continue to fund basic services. And so when we know that we're resting our financial plan on the stock market, I find that to be risky. I'm not personally opposed to higher tax rates. We see higher tax rates in countries around the world. I am separately concerned that we have a Hunger Games across states because of failures at the federal level in our tax policy at the federal level. And, you know, we're not talking about people leaving the country. We're talking about people leaving the state for other states. And we see people leaving the state for other states. We also see people not moving to New York. New York has a reputation as an expensive state, as a high tax state, and people don't choose to come here. They leave, they don't come. And so I think that there are consequences to those choices that I think need to be part of the mix when we talk about what the path forward should be.
Good, thank you. Last year, we authorized $2 billion of inflation fighting checks. Can you tell me how many of those checks have been sent out? What percentage has been sent out?
We sent out 8.2 million checks. There will be another run of checks for folks who were late filers. That will be, you know, a handful of checks, you know, a couple thousand checks.
So for the most part, they've been.
Oh, yeah, they were all sent out by the end of November.
Okay. Now, also in this current bill, we're reducing tax on tips up to $25,000 for individuals with incomes of additional up to $300,000 for a married couple. To my knowledge, individuals that were living on tips weren't earning enough money in tips to even pay income taxes. They were earning around $25,000 to $30,000, and they weren't paying taxes. Now we're basically giving individuals or families with an income in excess of $250,000 or $25,000 basically cut on tips that they had earned. And is that correct?
So I think that I think low income, you know, more than the top 50% of New Yorkers pay 99.8% of our taxes, and the bottom 50% of New Yorkers essentially don't end up paying taxes. They get refundable credits from the state. And so I don't have any information to contradict you about the income level of tipped workers. I also know a lot of tipped workers who never were reporting their tips, and so they weren't part of the income tax mix before. I think that the proposal to implement the federal deduction for tips at the state level is intended to help with affordability, but I can't speak to where that's going to fall across tipped workers, especially tipped workers in the city. I don't know what that income mix is going to be because I don't think we have good reporting about tipped income to rely on.
Okay, it just seems strange to me that we're giving an individual with $150,000 income a deduction of $25,000 if that money came in tips. And this year we're not in a fiscal catastrophe, but next year we're looking at some serious issues, and I think that we should be banking as much money as we can now because we're approaching the cliff rapidly.
I think that, look, as a tax administrator, I don't like treating income streams differently. So I don't like that we preference capital gains income over other kinds of income. I think that preferencing tipped income over non-tipped income, it's all income, and that we should have that tax burdens are most fairly distributed when we don't make those choices. But our tax code is full of those choices. We just published a 188-page annual report on New York's tax expenditures. We make choices. The state makes choices all the time about those preferences. I think the governor believes that this is an appropriate tax preference. I'm sure there will be robust discussion.
Follow up?
Senator Brisboard, who before said he didn't have questions,
Now has
has now been motivated with additional questions
I love
for
this.
us all. Senator Brisboard. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I did not have any questions until I did hear you, Commissioner, and thank you for being here
Of course.
tonight on a very long day. But I did hear you repeatedly when our chairs were asking questions say that the highest earning New Yorkers have the highest rates of outmigration. And I am looking at a report from the Fiscal Policy Institute that says they have lower rates of migration, and it's based on census data and data from your own department. And I was just curious if you could just share more about what rates you're looking at.
So we look at where taxpayers were last year and where they are this year. And we have access to information that I suspect they don't have access to, because we actually have access to the tax filings and we actually know the income of the people that we're talking about. We see a higher rate. I will say that the rate of outmigration for New Yorkers as a whole and for millionaires, taxpayers reporting $1 million in income or more, all of those rates are returning to pre-pandemic levels. But the rate for outmigration for millionaires is higher than the rate for outmigration for taxpayers as a whole. It just is.
Can you say what rates those are, the numbers?
I don't have it offhand, but you can find it on our website, Tax Facts on our website. We have charts and graphs and tables that speak to exactly this information.
In the Fiscal Policy Institute's report, which is based on, again, data from your own department, it says that all income ranges, a percentage dropped down to 2.5%.
Sounds about right.
Versus higher ranges all dropped lower. If you look at ranges of people making $10 million or over, only dropped down to somewhere between 0.5% and 1% of taxpayers. It does seem, in the data pulled from your own department, that those of higher income ranges are leaving at lower rates.
We certainly, that isn't the conclusions that my staff have drawn from the data that we have at our disposal.
And you don't have the numbers for us today?
I don't have it offhand, but again, we published information on our website. We also, of course, make data files available on open data, and I assume that that's the data that the Fiscal Policy Institute is relying on.
Thank you.
Will you commit to following up with Senator Bridgeport when he calls and asks for the data?
Absolutely. I will take your call anytime.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Williams for a 3-minute follow-up.
Thank you. In regards to the telecommunications assessment ceiling program, the executive proposes to extend the telecommunication assessment ceiling for an additional 4 years. Can you provide an overview on what the telecommunications assessment ceiling does?
Absolutely. So telecommunications equipment includes things like telephone poles and cabling that runs through multiple communities. So if you are a telecommunications provider, you may own telecommunications equipment in every community in the state or every community in a region of the state in your service area. If that property is all of that property is taxable property when it's on private property and so when we assess that, if each individual local assessor is assessing that property, then you may have that telephone pole valued differently in each town where you have telephone poles. The assessment ceiling program is a program that calls upon the tax department to set a cap on what the assessment for that equipment can be based on the assessment methodologies that are set out in the real property tax law. And then assessors can assess the property up to that cap but not beyond. And that creates consistency in the assessment for property tax purposes of this kind of equipment that is the same equipment that's just hitting jurisdiction after jurisdiction after jurisdiction. And so that's really the point of the program. I think it's been very successful in creating some uniformity in the property tax treatment. Now keep in mind that those individual jurisdictions all have their own property tax rates, so the amount of tax being paid on that property may vary from one jurisdiction to the next, but the underlying value of that property isn't what's driving the differences.
Right. And what impact does the telecommunication assessment ceiling have on municipalities in terms of revenue? And also, do local assessors support the extension of this proposal?
I have not heard pushback from the assessors. We've had the proposal in place for quite some time now. This isn't the first time it's up for extension. I think that municipalities this has been part of the mix for the property tax distribution in municipalities for many years now. And so I think it would add burdens to assessors to have to go back and separately assess these properties again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, and I believe that concludes our questions for the commissioner. I think that there is somewhere in the law books, common law, that if you're in a position for 5 years, you automatically become permanent.
I mean, to be clear, there would be a significant consequence to me in retirement. And I am eligible for retirement and in fact, actually contemplating. But I would lose $120,000 worth of sick leave benefits in retirement if I became commissioner.
Stay acting.
Right? I
Say
mean,
no
it just,
more.
I mean, the way I put it is you want people with good judgment in my role, and that just wouldn't be an exercise of good judgment.
You're right.
It just would be a bad choice. I don't care about the title, but I do care about making sure that I have health insurance.
Gotcha.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now calling Panel A, the Fiscal Policy Institute, the Manufacturers Alliance of New York, Invest in Our New York, Popular Democracy, and Partnership for New York City. Photographer? We can start from my left, your right, or your left, my right. Doesn't make a difference. Or we can start ladies first. Emily, you want to go first? I mean, how we want to do it?
Too many choices.
Too many choices? Okay. No? Yes.
I see, okay. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to testify. My name is Emily Eisner. I'm a PhD economist, and I'm currently the chief economist at the Fiscal Policy Institute and deputy director of the Fiscal Policy Institute. This year's state budget process raises an acute need for new revenue measures. By FPI's estimate, the federal One Big Beautiful Bill Act will lead to $15 billion in cuts to Medicaid and SNAP by 2030. The child care plan jointly announced by Governor Hochul and Mayor Mamdani will require additional revenue in the long term, at least $6 billion, to be sustainable and fully realized as a universal program. The New York City faces serious budgetary challenges from the accumulation of past policy commitments that remain underfunded and under-budgeted, as well as the need to fund the affordability agenda on which the new mayor was elected, which will require $5 to $10 billion in new funding through a combination of state aid and authorized city tax increases. Fortunately, the city and state are both in economically sound positions to impose tax increases. Today, the state and city both have robust economies with large populations of ultra-high earners who can sustainably support a higher level of social spending. This past summer's enactment of the OBBBA dramatically lowered the federal tax liability of top earners, as was already discussed. In New York alone, FPI estimates that the value of these federal tax cuts for millionaire earners will be about $12 billion total. The cost of that tax cut to social programs will be up to 1 million New Yorkers losing their health insurance, about 500,000 this July, and up to 200,000 New Yorkers facing hunger due to the loss of SNAP benefits. FPI has shown in detail that these cuts to services are not inevitable, that the state government must simply step in to take over the federal government's role in funding these programs. Finally, FPI has done extensive research showing that tax increases do not lead to outmigration of New York's high earners. Elevated outmigration in 2020 and 2021 was driven by the COVID-19 pandemic, and there was no evidence that the 2021 tax increases caused outmigration of top earners. To the contrary, we have seen outmigration rates return to normal fastest for the top earners and have continued to see rapid growth in the millionaire population. I would be happy to answer further questions on these topics, and thank you so much for your time.
We'll go to Manufacturers Alliance. We'll go in order of the list.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here this evening. My name is Randy Wolken. I'm president and CEO of MACNY, the Manufacturers Association, as well as the Manufacturers Alliance in New York State. We represent manufacturers from Long Island to Buffalo. New York State is a top 10 manufacturing state, but I believe under the right policies, we can be a top 5 manufacturing state. But we have to acknowledge already the meaningful progress being made under Governor Hochul's leadership as well as yours. It demonstrated a strong commitment to workforce development, apprenticeships, overall advanced manufacturing, semiconductor growth, supply chain resiliency, and regional economic development. In appreciation of this, I'd like to share a particular difficulty we have with the current proposal from the governor regarding decoupling. In that spirit, we share that by decoupling, we don't take advantage of key federal manufacturing tax provisions in 2 areas: research and development expensing and qualified production property depreciation. This kind of policy encourages company investment, which results in more jobs and greater tax revenues over both immediately and in the long term. We believe this decoupling moves us in the wrong direction instead of the ones we've been heading in. Manufacturers in particular have to make long-term capital-intensive investment decisions. They expand facilities, install advanced manufacturing equipment, modernize production lines, invest in research and development. But if they don't get a chance to do that, they go to other states or other countries. By decoupling, we actually don't improve revenues, we just defer them. The reality is, in the biggest challenge we actually have is these investments might not be made at all. In fact, we put at risk nearly $30 billion of annual investment that happens in the capital-intensive high-tech manufacturing sector. And we are competing with other countries, and we're competing with other states, some very close to where we're at. Now, we recognize and respect the state's responsibility in terms of managing its finances prudently. Again, this only allows for faster cost recovery so they can be reinvested, actually, and that's typically what happens at a manufacturing facility. Therefore, we really run the risk of not getting these investments at all, and therefore not getting the taxes at all and related jobs and taxes. Now, the impact on small and medium-sized manufacturers is even larger. Cash flow matters deeply. There's administrative complexity. Investment decisions are often made on tight margins. In fact, they may not be able to get the loans at all. And that's what we've been hearing from our members as they begin to understand the impact that this decoupling will have. We've made tremendous strides in strengthening the manufacturing base. It's time to grow our manufacturing base again, along with those great paying manufacturing jobs that will last well into and well beyond the AI concerns. Let's retain and grow high quality family supporting jobs. Let's strengthen local supply chains, and let's remain competitive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Bravin Runga. I'm presenting this testimony on behalf of Invest in Our New York. IONI is a statewide campaign of over 80 organizations fighting to make New York a more equitable state. We advocate for widely supported changes to our state's tax laws to tax the very rich and highly profitable corporations so they pay their fair share, and that billions of dollars can be invested into programs and services that New Yorkers need. In 2021, our campaign led the statewide push to win $4.3 billion in new revenue. This enabled the state to invest in new funding for Black and brown school districts, healthcare and rental assistance, and a first-in-the-nation fund for immigrant workers. New York is one of the most expensive states in the country and has the highest levels of income inequality of any state in the nation. Studies have shown that while the state has gained millionaires and billionaires in recent years, working people are leaving the state because they can no longer afford to live here. Since those new taxes were implemented in 2021, that has happened, and working people are leaving the state at a higher rate as the ultra-wealthy. The federal cuts from H.R. 1 have devastated the state. This is one of the largest transfers of wealth from the working class to the rich in American history, and I might add is a continuation of federal policies that slash social services and tax breaks for the wealthy that have devastated the middle class in this country. Because of H.R. 1, 1 million New Yorkers could lose their health insurance because of cuts to the essential plan and Medicaid. 350,000 New Yorkers could go hungry because of cuts to SNAP, and counties now face an additional $1.3 billion in new costs. Meanwhile, the richest New Yorkers will see a $12 billion tax cut this year. In her executive budget proposal, Governor Hochul did not truly reckon with a devastating scale of federal funding cuts. She did not propose any new adequate revenue to deal with these cuts. And she did not propose new revenue to permanently fund universal child care, which includes paying child care workers a living wage and scaling capacity across the state. Our package contains 4 bills that, if passed, would raise tens of billions of dollars through a combination of personal tax increases on the top 5% of earners, corporate tax reforms targeting the most profitable corporations, and addressing loopholes that allow millionaires and billionaires to shield their wealth from tax liability. Nearly 100 local elected officials signed a letter supporting our package. I urge the legislature to include these proposals to raise progressive revenue across the state in your one-house budgets and fight for their inclusion in the final budget in order to preserve existing social services against federal tax and enact new measures to address the affordability crisis. These measures are broadly popular with the public across Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairwoman Kruger, Chairman Prutlow, members of the legislature, thank you for the opportunity to testify tonight. New York cannot tax its way to affordability, and raising corporate taxes now would make the state less competitive at exactly the wrong moment. My name is Alex Pena, Executive Vice President of the Partnership for New York City. Our members, more than 350 leading companies, support nearly 1 million jobs across New York. I want to speak candidly about what we're hearing directly from employers. Multiple major firms have indicated to us that they are pausing net new hiring in New York in the current environment. In addition, one large employer is already well advanced in evaluating the relocation of approximately 5,000 jobs to Texas, including several thousand currently based in New York City. These are not public announcements, but they are real conversations happening in boardrooms right now as financial analysts explain the basic math. You don't solve an affordability crisis by squeezing the economy. You solve it by growing paychecks. Wage growth driven by strong job creation is what gives families lasting relief. The concern is not simply one move, it's a cumulative signal we are sending. In an increasingly mobile economy, we should be careful about creating the perception that the state of New York is daring its largest employers to look elsewhere. This is a risky game to play with the sector that remains the backbone of the state's economy. What successful states do well is not mysterious. They align public policy with their core economic strengths. Texas openly embraces energy as a pillar industry and builds policy around it. California, despite its regulatory posture, has constantly protected and cultivated its technology ecosystem. Massachusetts has deliberately structured policy to grow life sciences and biotech. New York's equivalent sector in financial services, for example, a global industry that supports hundreds of thousands of middle-class jobs across the 5 boroughs alone, and the broader region far beyond Wall Street itself. Yet too often our public policy posture towards this sector feels adversarial rather than strategic. More broadly, we at the partnership understand the fiscal pressures facing the state. But in today's economy, growth decisions are highly mobile and tax policy cannot be viewed in isolation. The real question before us is whether New York is aligned across taxes, regulation, workforce, legal structure, and capital markets to remain competitive for the investment that supports middle-class jobs and long-term growth. Today, we're already operating in the highest tax business environment in the nation. On the proposals now under discussion, the state's top corporate rate would raise from 7.25% to 11.5%. In New York City, that would push the combined top marginal corporate rate to roughly 22.5%, more than 10% above New Jersey. That is not a marginal change, it is a market signal. And critically, it does not take a mass exodus to create real fiscal consequences in New York State, as we heard the commissioner mention before. 10 or 15 major taxpayers adjusting their hiring plans, their expansion plans, or their location decisions can materially impact revenues. I look forward to continue this
Thank you very
conversation.
much. Assemblymember Bailey.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Randy, I have a quick question for you, and I apologize if you mentioned it in there and I didn't see it in your the testimony I grabbed online. But for the typical small or medium-sized manufacturer in your membership, can you estimate how the decoupling from the federal R&E expensing and acceleration cost would change specifically in two areas, annually the New York tax liability, and then the cash flow over the next 3 to 5 years. And then I have a quick follow-up question.
So actually, you're asking, and we've asked companies to try to estimate kind of impact, but we do have examples of companies that literally won't make any of their annual investments if their tax burden goes up, because the deferment is something they do year after year after year. So literally, we're talking about collectively billions of potential loss. And literally what they have to do is get a loan in order to get the advancement in their capital investment. So the real challenge is now I can't do it at all. And then they have to decide whether I'm going to do it in New York or some other state, a close by state like Pennsylvania, or others that have not decoupled in this space. So, I mean, you can have other differences with other states in some areas of taxation. This one kills capital investment. And that's really the long-term revenue generator for what goes on in the state of New York. It's part of what happened when we lost literally hundreds of thousands of workers and billions of dollars of investments over decades. We've reversed that trend. We don't want to go back. And I think I'm really excited about where we're going. I really think we can see growth, and a huge amount of growth. In fact, we could have 1 out of every 4 or 5 chips made in New York now. But that ecosystem needs to be invested in long term, and that gives revenues back to the tax base.
Okay, so real quick, I heard you mention the number of 30 billion in jeopardy, but so how many capital projects would likely be postponed or canceled?
Well, it's
know?
I can only get, I can't, it's difficult to make the exact projection, obviously.
Okay.
But what I'm saying, especially for small and medium-sized companies, their margins are very small. So it might be in that hundreds of thousands, right? So in their projects, cumulatively end up being billions, but for a particular company, we actually walked the halls just this week, you know, they might lose $600,000. It's a company of 100 people. Over the last few years, they've added 10 individuals. They would add even more individuals, but now they won't be able to do that annual investment of $600,000.
Okay.
So it's all cumulative, but ends up being the biggest impact, actually. But literally, we can provide this to you, examples of companies. In fact, I just saw a company member on the way here who literally said, "You're kidding me, right? I won't be able to make my capital investment this year. I won't do it at all." So that's our biggest fear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator, I'm sorry, Brisport.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Eisner, my first question is for you. Your organization has done incredible work analyzing the effects of H.R. 1 on New York, not just the potentially devastating cuts, but also the effects on the ultra-rich, those making $1 million or more, and the decrease in federal taxes they will see. Just want to pose a hypothetical to you. If we were to increase state taxes on these same class of ultra-rich by $10 billion this year, would they be paying more or less in taxes than they were before H.R. 1?
We estimate that their tax savings from HR 1 sum to $12 billion. So in total, that would be less.
So we could raise $10 billion new state taxes this year on the ultra-rich, and they would still be getting a tax cut from last year.
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Ranga, 5 years ago, you mentioned this in your testimony, we implemented a modest tax increase on the ultra-rich. We were told that doing so would cause millionaires and billionaires to flee New York. Hearing some of those same arguments again tonight from one of your fellow panelists. Do we have fewer millionaires now than we did in 2021?
Thanks for your question, Senator. We actually have more millionaires and billionaires than we did then, almost more than any time in our history.
Thank you. And just to Mr. Fulop from the partnership, how do you respond to the multiple reports from organizations and research groups showing that there is not this mass exodus of millionaires and billionaires due to the tax increases passed a few years ago?
So thank you, Senator. It's Alex Pena from the partnership. I appreciate the question. I think when you thinking about that conceptually, there are more millionaires today across the board than there were back in 2021. So yes, the numbers increase, but proportionally how it's growing competitively to the rest of the country is another question, and there is data around that as well. So that's kind of how we're viewing that. But relevantly, when we're talking about the corporate franchise tax rate in the environment, we're talking about predictability. We're talking about the fact that if we push, we just can't keep playing with tax policy in isolation and saying, let's push a little bit more, push a little bit more, when there are things that we can do sequentially without raising taxes, as the governor has proposed, in order to get to a place where we can see cost savings, look at our expenditures and actually grow out the middle class in New York by maintaining investment here and attracting new investment.
Thank you. And I think Dr. Eisner, I just wanted to pitch that to you as well.
Oh, I just wanted to make a comment that with the corporate tax, it's not based on where employees of businesses are, it's based on where business is being done. So there's not a direct attack on employment coming from increasing the corporate tax rate.
Thank you so much.
Palmisano?
Yes, thank you. My questions is for Randy. I want to pick up where my colleague left off. Obviously, you made it very clear the impact of the small and medium-sized manufacturers for decoupling with the higher upfront tax costs. Not to be able to invest in new equipment, automation, R&D to stay nationally competitive. We know New York State's already not very business-friendly and has one of the worst tax climates and tax competitiveness ratings in the country. I want to just pivot to the other part of that, though, when we talk about does MACNY anticipate this leading to accelerated job loss through either reduced hiring or earlier decisions to move production elsewhere? Is that a possibility of this?
It's a very high likelihood, actually. If you don't make any capital investments, you're not going to continue your business. I will tell you categorically, when I go to companies, I ask them one question: what's your capital spend this year? And if a capital spend goes down or it doesn't exist, they're actually in a process of either shutting down or leaving. Because capital investment is the only way you grow a manufacturer today. There's no other way to get there. And so the reality is many other businesses can survive a variety of things, but you can't survive the competitiveness of other states and other countries. And that's probably why we're so concerned about this. This particular type, research and development means the future. Capital means the future. More employees are about the capital and more employees are about investment. So that's why investment's so important. By the way, we're just delaying it. You're still going to get the investment, correct? You're going to reap many more billions related to this investment. So it's kind of short-sighted in a short term. And I think that's our biggest concern, is that we'll actually lose the investments completely. We won't just get a smaller percentage of it.
I think I want to pivot real quick to energy. There was a report, a memo that came out today from NYSERDA President Doreen Harris, who's a co-chair of the Climate Action Council, talking about the cost of compliance with the CLCPA. And I'll just go through some of the parts. Impact to residential heating with natural gas, $4,000 a year. Increase in price of the pump, an increase of $2.20 a gallon on top of what we have now. Increase the price of diesel, $2.41 a gallon on top of what it is now. And for small and medium-sized commercial businesses, depending on the utility and size of the facility, utility costs could increase as much as 46%. And delivering truck costs could increase as much as 60%. Energy is very intensive for manufacturing. Is your industry very concerned about the energy policies, the green mandates, the all electrification and all reliable and dispatchable energy?
Energy is one of the most critical inputs, both availability and affordability. It will impact manufacturing jobs and growth. We need to have a realistic long-term policy, and I believe we continue to invest in greener opportunities, but we don't have enough energy now. Literally won't have enough energy for the growth and opportunities that we're now projecting. We could lose out on the next moment of manufacturing.
Thank you.
Senator Rhodes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Mr. Phillips' point, in 2010, the Citizens Budget Commission reports that New York had 12.7% of the nation's millionaires. By 2022, the most recent data available, New York's share had shrunk 4 percentage points to 8.7%. New York City's share fell from 6.5% to 4.2% over the same period. In contrast, Florida and Texas, dramatically lower tax states, increased by 2.8 percentage points and 0.8 percentage points, respectively. Margaret Thatcher, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money, and New York is running out of money. Next. Mr. Fulop, I believe you said that with the governor's party amendment to extend the temporary Article 9 tax rate for 3 years, according to the Citizens Budget Commission, they've reported that New York City's business activity already faces the highest combined corporate tax rate in the country, a top marginal rate of 17.44%, resulting from the layering of state, city, and MTA region corporate taxes. Raising the state's top rate to match New Jersey would push the combined rate in New York City to 22.48%, nearly doubling that of New Jersey's. Do you think that puts us at a competitive advantage or disadvantage?
So, Senator, first, really
If you could
quickly,
just answer that yes or no.
it's not put us competitive. I was just going to clarify, I'm Alex Pena from the partnership, filling in for Steve Phillip today, but yeah, the answer is no.
I only have 3 minutes. That's why I'm being so
Yeah,
quick.
it does not make us competitive.
And finally, Mr. Wolkin, question for you. The decoupling provisions, we already know that there's, in 2014, a 0% corporate franchise tax rate was enacted for manufacturers organized as C Corps, which leaves small and mid-sized manufacturers, which are 75% of the manufacturers, paying exorbitantly high, and in fact, the highest tax rates in the nation. Decoupling, as I understand it, simply doesn't eliminate taxes, but merely changes the timing of those taxes, loads them up front.
It does. It does.
That would discourage or delay capital investment projects, particularly in semiconductor and advanced manufacturing sectors that the state is actually trying to actively attract.
Yes.
Would cause the potential long-term loss of tax base if investment shifts to other states, because people are going to go where they can maximize their profit and avoid their loss.
It does.
Will increase near-term tax liability for small and mid-sized manufacturers, especially when many operate on thin margins.
Yes.
And those upfront tax burdens on those same manufacturers will result in them leaving. Is that the concern?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Assembly.
Assembly is done.
Assembly's done. Oh, wait, Joanne Simon doesn't agree.
Assemblywoman Simon.
There we go. Sorry. So, Dr. Eisner, I have a question for you. Years ago, I was on a plane and read an article, and was Elliot Spitzer had run into somebody on the plane. It was one of the guys who was a partner in Odyssey Partners. I can't remember which one. Very wealthy guy. And they were talking about the ways that our economy is getting stratified. And this is post-Reagan, and we have too many people being too wealthy and too many people not earning enough. And that this seems to me that we are in a state of, this is happening around the country, and we're doing this little Hunger Games between New Jersey and New York. Everybody's moving to Texas, and Texas in many ways sucks. And so the question really is, isn't this like one giant sunk cost fallacy? That we just keep sinking more money into these holes because we keep churning that up and we keep stratifying further the economy. Don't we need a new deal?
Thank you for your question. I was just talking to my colleague from Texas this morning about Texas sucking. Yes, New York is, by some measures, the most unequal state in the country. And if you look at the top 5 most unequal states in the U.S. and you look at how much inequality has changed over the last 5 years, New York has increased the most in inequality since before the pandemic, basically. So absolutely, we have seen, I sort of came of age during the financial crisis, and my entire adult life has been the story of inequality being horrible and getting worse over time. I think that one thing that I hope you legislators are focused on is that I do believe that creating an affordable New York involves taxing and spending on social services, and it also involves creating energy production and home production to make sure that people have access to the infrastructure that they need. So finding ways to bring costs down is another part of the puzzle. I don't want to advocate against that approach, but I see taxing and spending on social services as critical, particularly in a moment in time when we've seen huge federal cuts to those services.
Thank you.
Senator?
Oh, thank you. Senator, yes. Good evening. Okay, so there's so much and yet so little time. So for the New York Partnership, and we already heard great discussion about pluses and minuses of increases or very high taxes. But we never seem to hear enough about doing something about our out-of-control tax expenditures. I don't know if you were here earlier when I was having a discussion with IBM about the fact that they were asking us for money because they've literally run out of subsidies to get from us because they pay negative 4% taxes. Would you agree there's a serious question about why we have such a tax expenditure out of control model in our state, that while we have small businesses and manufacturers here complaining immensely about their tax costs, and I actually agree, because we made decisions that some of the biggest corporations in the world can do anything they want here, not pay taxes, and not even have the nerve to realize that they're asking us for money on top of it when they have so much private equity. I can't even believe they think they would need it for anything. Do you guys have a kind of position on this?
Thank you, Senator. Our position right now is that sequentially we should not increase corporate taxes across New York State for our corporations, and that instead we should look at expenditures, regulation, workforce taxes, legal structure, capital markets together cumulatively to look at the ecosystem for competitiveness, because ultimately if we find a way to bring cohesiveness there, we will maintain jobs here and we will attract jobs here. So when in terms of the question about expenditures, I think expenditures is part of the question, right? In terms of, but it's also taxes, regulations, litigation, environment, our courts, capital markets, and ultimately at the end of the day, this is about jobs for us, maintaining jobs here and growing out jobs here and attracting
So if
them.
I heard you right, since I did not ask you about raising taxes, I asked you about reducing the subsidy system. I think you were saying maybe that you agree with me.
Senator, I would say right now that what we're, on behalf of the partnership, what we're positioned to say right now is that we should not raise taxes this year, and we should take a holistic look at our expenditures in partnership with the nonprofit community as well as the business sector to look at a way in which we can make this environment sustainable for the future, because right now it's not predictable, it's uncertain, and we're playing with fire if we're going to go about taxes in isolation. And to your point, I'm not trying to dodge the expenditure question, but I think there's a sequentialness, there's a sequential piece of this, and what we're advocating for is to make sure that it's part of the conversation, because right now we're looking at taxes in isolation, and we shouldn't. We should be looking at the whole ecosystem like other states do successfully, and making sure we anchor ourselves properly for the future.
I'm taking it as a yes because I have 1 second left. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
I believe that concludes this section of the hearing. I want to thank you all for your participation and for staying so late. I'm sorry that we're 2 hours behind schedule, but the first one ran a little bit longer.
Exactly.
Okay,
This is the last hearing.
this is definitely the last hearing.
Right.
So I have 2 panels left, but panel B only has 1 individual. So I think I'm going to take an executive privilege here and combine the 2. So will Communications Worker District 1, an expert in global security, anti-illicit trade, and Philip Morris all proceed to the table? No, no.
I forgot about Good evening.
Good evening. Okay. Guess we can start. You can start. Yeah.
Is it on now?
No, it's on. You good.
Great, great.
You're good.
Distinguished members, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Eric B. Hawk. I appear before you as an expert in global security and illicit trade. with over 25 years of experience in law enforcement and international affairs. As a former law enforcement officer in the state of Florida, liaison to NATO, and security and investigations expert with the United Nations, I have specialized in dismantling global organized criminal networks. In the private sector, I spearheaded operations that led to the seizure of over 5.6 billion illicit cigarettes in the Americas, and over $8 million in counterfeit devices within the United States. The majority were seized right here in the great state of New York. I'm here today to share my perspective on how tax policy directly dictates the scale of illicit trade and the safety of our communities. New York currently faces a critical challenge. It holds one of the highest cigarette taxes in the nation, which has resulted in an illicit market that accounts for over 50% of the state's consumption. This black market costs the state approximately $1 billion annually in lost revenue. As I saw in the cheap white cigarette smuggling routes I investigated throughout the Americas, criminal organizations are highly agile. If New York creates a significant price gap for pouches, these same syndicates will flood the market with unregulated, counterfeit, and potentially dangerous black market pouches to meet demand. When taxes on reduced risk products, such as oral pouches, are raised to near combustible levels, the state creates an economic vacuum that organized crime is eager to fill. My experience in global conflict zones and domestic investigations shows that criminal syndicates are highly responsive to price differentials. High taxes on non-nicotine and nicotine pouches will not stop consumption. They will simply shift it from licensed, tax-paying retailers to unregulated street-level bad actors. A science-led approach to a healthier New York requires risk-proportionate taxation. This model ensures that the most harmful products, combustibles, are taxed most heavily, while lower-risk alternatives, oral pouches, remain financially accessible to adult smokers seeking an off-ramp from cigarettes. Imposing a 75% wholesale tax on oral pouches eliminates the financial incentive for harm reduction. This policy forces the state's adult smokers to choose between expensive legal alternatives or cheaper unregulated black market products that evade all quality and safety controls. And that's, by the way, where your youth are buying these devices, these pouches. My recommendations are rather than, all right. Well, thank you very much. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Good evening to the chair and the committee. My name is Dr. Brian Erkla, and I have spent the past 25 years studying tobacco and nicotine, including work at the National Institutes of Health and the FDA's Center for Tobacco Products. Today, I'm here to discuss Governor Hochul's budget proposal, specifically the proposed 75% tax on nicotine pouches, in my capacity of head of scientific engagement for Philip Morris International U.S. businesses, PMI. PMI has never and will never sell combusted cigarettes in the United States. Rather, we intend to make cigarettes a thing of the past by offering a portfolio of smoke-free, lower-risk, FDA-authorized alternatives like nicotine pouches. So I grew up right across the river. My mother worked in this complex for several decades, and I'm particularly worried that 1.5 million people in New York State continue to smoke cigarettes. And this hasn't been even, right? Cigarette smoking is much higher among low-income New Yorkers, veterans, older populations, and those with mental health conditions. Now, tragically, 28,000 New Yorkers will die this year due to their use of combusted cigarettes. These are people like our friends, our neighbors. These are people like my father, who died 2 years ago. This preventable loss comes with an annual cost of $12 billion to take for healthcare costs for people who smoke cigarettes, and $7 billion for Medicaid alone. Now, the FDA and the broader scientific community recognize that nicotine pouches pose a lower health risk than combusted cigarettes. Under the Biden administration, after years of scientific review, Zyn nicotine pouches were deemed to be appropriate for the protection of public health, determining that, quote, adults who smoke who switch completely to Zyn are expected to experience reduced risk of cancer, respiratory toxicity, and cardiovascular toxicity. This bar is very high. Only 85 products have ever received authorization out of 25 million applications. Now, the reason the FDA made this decision is one, nicotine pouches like ZYN have about more than 99% less harmful chemicals than cigarette smoke. Two, adults who smoke and start to use nicotine pouches very often switch completely away from that combusted product. And three, youth use of these products has remained low according to the CDC. And I'll note, to put that in context, it's at 1.8% from the CDC. This is only a fraction of what we see for cannabis, vaping, or alcohol used by youth. Policy should align with scientific evidence and FDA's relative risk framework, which aims to prevent youth use while simultaneously supporting harm reduction for adults who smoke. Unfortunately, a 75% tax on nicotine pouches would make them significantly more expensive and less accessible to New Yorkers who smoke, removing incentives to switch. In closing, products should be taxed in proportion to their risk for the best public health outcomes and to avoid a rampant illicit market. I urge the committee not to move forward with this tax, which will penalize New Yorkers looking for harm reduction options. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assemblymember Bail.
Oh, no, we
I'm
have
sorry,
one more.
One more.
And Mike, I got a note saying you were the replacement. So then when I saw you up there, I had somebody come and double check. So I was hoping I was right. Okay, fine.
Really
Thank
good.
you. I hope I didn't like drag you down here against your will.
And I'm going to speed read through this thing because to try to beat the clock.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, committee members. I'm Mike McGuire, testifying on behalf of Chris Kohler of the Mason Tenders District Council, representing 17,000 members of the Laborers International Union of North America and the HICRA Reform Coalition. First and foremost, let me be clear. We are at our core worker advocates. We do not take issue with workers getting health coverage, and we do not take issue with the public good or Medicaid. They are essential programs, and they should be fully funded. It is the ass-backwards way this corrupt law is structured that is the problem. In 1997, HICRA imposed 2 taxes on health benefits funds, taxing them to provide health care for indigent people, including workers whose employers refused to provide their workers with coverage. Since then, HICRA taxes have been raised 14 times with little or no public discussion. The 2 original programs have ballooned to 9 programs today. Additionally, $5 billion in HICRA taxes now subsidize Medicaid each year. HICRA taxes are now perennially either the 3rd or 4th largest revenue source to the state. Today, these 9 programs and the Medicaid subsidy have grown to an astonishing $6.5 billion. HICRA unfairly penalizes unions and responsible non-union employers and uses that money to subsidize the corporate pirates and the bottom-feeding employers in our state. Every unionized workplace and every responsible non-union employer who provides health benefits must pay this tax, while the scummy employers that abjectly refuse to provide health benefits to their workers are let off the hook. HICRA, as it stands today, incentivizes bad actors to not provide health care for their employees and disincentivizes good employers from bettering the benefits they have provided for their workers. New York is the second highest expensive health benefit marketplace in the country. The average 2023 employee health insurance contribution for a family coverage was $7,588. For the Mason Tenders, the annual contribution for that is just under $10,000 per year. Note that my testimony centers on the work on the Mason Tenders, but we are by no means an aberration. We are a prime example of the exploitation under HICRA. Here are some 2023 statistics, the most recent foilable info we could obtain for the Mason Tenders. HICRA taxes add about 7% annually to the cost of our health benefits, so we start deep in a hole at the bargaining table. The deduction from our pay to fund health care is $13.90 per hour. To put that in perspective, the deduction for our pensions to carry us the rest of our lives is only $7.80 an hour. We were the 43rd largest highest payer to the covered lives HICRA tax in the entire state in 2023. We covered 12,200 workers, but paid more HICRA than McDonald's with 34,000 workers and more than Walmart with 40,000 workers in New York State. Combined, all 5 locals of the Mason Tenders pay in approximately $10 million in HICRA taxes annually. And we must bid for work against non-union contractors who provide no health benefits, thus giving them an almost 20% advantage in the bidding process. We propose that the HICRA, wow, I didn't go fast enough.
Thank you. Good evening. I have a quick question, and this is for Dr. Brian Ercola. I too am a mother and concerned about our youth, but I didn't hear the number that you had indicated as far as youth using the FDA authorized smoke-free products like the nicotine pouches. So I was wondering if you can tell me that again, and then if you can also explain what is being done to prevent youth from using them.
Of course. So I would just like to start with, I can only talk about what we as a company do. Nicotine pouches is a class of products, and Zyn being our product there. So the latest data from the CDC puts youth usage rates at about 1.8%. So you can compare that to vaping closer to maybe 5 and cannabis use in the 10 range, right? And we take prevention of underage use very, very seriously. We have an approach to this. So it starts with the products, right? So all of the flavors that were authorized by the FDA that we currently sell are in flavors that have been around for decades and decades in smokeless tobacco. So there is no peach Bellini that we're selling on this market. There is no cotton candy, nothing like that. Secondly, we do not work with influencers or athletes. That is, all of our properties are age gated. And when I say age gated, it is not one of those, are you 21, click yes or no. You actually have to be third party verified. When it comes to social media, we only ever use things that are age gated as well. So that really limits what we can do, but it keeps it out of the eyes of people who are underage. We also work really closely with our retailers, training them regularly and going back to make sure that new employees have access to that training.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you. And Mike, first, I'm wearing a couple of hats today, different hats, but I also happen to be the ranking member on the Labor Committee, and I also serve on the Health Committee. I know you didn't get an opportunity to finish your testimony. Obviously, we'll have a chance to read your written testimony as well, but I would appreciate the opportunity to follow up with you, just so I have a better understanding of the particular issue. One, the specific tax that's being imposed, historically, how the rates have increased, and certainly happy to take a look at that, obviously.
Absolutely.
No, I appreciate that. We had the acting tax commissioner, Amanda Hiller, testify, obviously lead us off in this hearing. She indicated that the justification for the governor's proposal, specifically with respect to nicotine products, was to keep them out of to disincentivize their use and to keep them out of the hands of kids. As an alternative to increasing the taxes, what would be your suggestion as to how we could accomplish that objective to keep them out of the hands of kids governmentally? I mean, it's already, their use is already restricted, but what else could we be doing as an alternative?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is to put more effort into enforcement. Of all the enforcement that I did around the country, New York was definitely one of the strongest, I would say, especially Nassau County. They're definitely on the ball. I work closely with them. They work closely together with the FDA investigators as well, which was a real benefit. So enforcement was a major deal, especially in New York. That's what I would say.
I mean, we've seen some real successes lately. So if we think about any tobacco or nicotine product use, any category, since 2019, those rates have dropped by 66%. We are at record level lows of any tobacco or nicotine use in this country among youth. Now, what we did there is the age of purchase went from 18 to 21. And that has had an incredible effect on sort of that social sourcing that you might see among youth. So that was a great move. But I think there's a lot of things we could do in the education space to make people aware of these products and what the differences are and what the differences are in risk. But also, I think when it comes to youth usage of these products, right, I think social media was mentioned quite a few times. Now, I mentioned that we only use age-gated properties and we are only in control of our own message. We often see things on TikTok or other places that we do not approve of and we did not make and we would like to come down. And we sometimes have issues with those companies asking them to remove posts that we think are inappropriate. I think having all these partners here, maybe we could talk about something.
Would love to follow up. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes, good evening. Last panel, our last panel, so we're all there. Thank you. My question is for Doctor. I've just had a kind of an exchange with the commissioner, you know, when you say 1.5 million smokers, $12 billion in health costs, and our Medicaid, we're talking about how our Medicaid budget is rising, and it seemed like the commissioner wanted to focus on youth prevention. I think you've addressed that a little bit, but I really want to speak more to the, you know, the adult users, the people. Can you speak more, and I know you deal with the FDA, the authorization process and how these smoke-free alternatives are better options for people who smoke? What's been said there?
Yeah, so as I said, it's a rather long process. The application itself is several hundreds of thousands of pages long. It includes clinical studies done at the same places, pharma companies, clinical research organizations, chemistry data, toxicology data, perception data, youth data, pretty much any kind of data you could think about. It's very rigorous. As I mentioned, only 84 out of 25 million applications have been made. But what they're looking at is whether or not the standard is appropriate for the protection of public health. And what that means is the benefit to adults who are using cigarettes or other tobacco products, switching, outweighs these risks to youth, which is a major, major concern when they're going through these applications. So the FDA looked at all of our marketing. They looked at what was going on around the country, various surveys, as much data as they could get, and they determined that we had cleared that bar, that adults are switching over, that youth are not picking this up. In fact, the CDC showed no significant increase year over year. The CDC Foundation, which is supported by the Bloomberg Philanthropies and Bill Gates Foundation, found 1.6, a fairly similar number among the same group. So, you know, this authorization also comes with responsibilities. We have to report all of our marketing to the agency every year. They see absolutely everything we do. They can come to our manufacturing facilities. They can take our product off the market if we are not doing what we are supposed to do. So it's very rigorous and a lot of responsibilities tied to it.
I have one more question, and on my question with the commissioner, like, I don't understand why we're going to increase the price of this so much. That might be a disincentive for someone to get off smoking, but I won't get into the conversation there. But I have more of a, because I know you being a doctor, is there scientific consensus that nicotine itself is not a carcinogen and that the primary cancer risk from smoking comes from combustion and toxicants in cigarette smoke?
Absolutely. So the FDA has stated that nicotine is not a carcinogen. The World Health Organization has done the same, as has Health Canada. So all of those groups have, you know, the saying kind of goes that people smoke for the nicotine, but they die from the tar. So it is not nicotine which is responsible for COPD, lung cancer, cardiovascular disease. It is all of those other things in smoke, the carcinogens that cause cancer, the respiratory toxicants. Those are what are making up those 28,000 deaths and $12 billion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm
Senator.
sorry, I don't have any questions, but I just want to point out, so my mother didn't die of lung cancer from smoking from age 13 to age 88? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that was it. Thank you.
I believe the assembly is finished.
Great, thank you very much.
I want to thank you all for your testimony. Thank you for staying. They have no questions. So this concludes this portion of the 14th hearing. We appreciate your participation. We do have everyone's testimonies in print. Everything that has been gathered throughout these 14 hearings will be discussed, and we will use the information that we've gathered in the formulation of our what we call one-house budgets. The Senate will do a budget, the Assembly will do a budget, and we'll compare those with the governor's proposed budgets. And hopefully by April 1st, we come up with one budget for the state of New York. Thank you very much, and that concludes this hearing.